see a lot of familiar faces, which is great. We're a small community, the cryptid community, and we go from event to event. We see each other, we get to know faces, and I see a lot of familiar faces. Ike, I'm in West Virginia, and I know you guys, and I don't always know your name, so come up and remind me, and I know you don't remember my name, or you call me by my last name, which I'll answer to either way, Jeff Craig. So I made the map in black, and along with my cohort, John Stamey, we decided to put on a Frogman Festival, and so here we are today. And thank you for being here. You're going to learn a lot today from our speakers, and they're going to run the gamut. We've got everything from Mothman to Frogman to ghosts and storytelling and folklore, a little bit of something for everybody. And if you want to camp out here all day, I certainly think you will be entertained the whole time. And when you have a break, go out and definitely visit our vendors. They're what really helps make this event unique, because they are so unique and they're so talented. So please go out there and make sure you check them out. Even the ones way back in the back hallway. They really wanted to be here and we made room for them, so make sure you can check everybody out. And then we've got, of course, MetaZoo here, who's helping sponsor the event, so thank you, MetaZoo. I want to introduce our first speaker. Their name is Dee Elliott, and I met Dee online for the first time, like many people do these days in various different realms. And then we finally got to meet in person at CryptidCon.
2021.
Yes. And here we are today, working together, collaborating. So again, cryptid community is small. We support each other, and it's just great to have that. And I'm glad to bring it to Cincinnati. Dee is a Ohio native and is from Springfield, but now is in West Virginia. So we lost him, unfortunately. But he's very happy. He's got his West Virginia hat on. And in Morgantown, Dee has been enamored with stories about the most strange and bizarre parts of our world since they were young. Dee got their master's from Bowling Green in popular culture with a focus in folklore. Bowling Green in the house. Their masters focused on how West Virginia urban legends like Mothman and the Flatwoods Monster have affected the towns around them. Currently, they work for West Virginia University at the Regional History Center, as well as for MetaZoo trading card game. So if you're on the Discord with MetaZoo, Dee is a moderator. Their favorite cryptid is a tie between Mothman and Flatwoods Monster. No, Frogman, that's okay.
I would say it's number 3.
Okay, a close third. Maybe after today it'll bump up, we'll see. Well, they always love hearing these stories as well, so please share your stories after the presentation by Dee. They would love to hear it. So I want to welcome our first presenter, Dee Elliott.
How are y'all doing today? Well, welcome to the Frogman Festival. Like Jeff said, it's been an interesting process seeing it all develop from nothing. We have the Mothman Festival. We even have the Flatwoods Monster Festival. It's nice to see a cryptid festival/convention here in Ohio for once. And I wanted to introduce myself a little bit more. Like Jeff said, I'm a graduate of Bowling Green State, focused with a MA in popular culture with a focus in folklore. I went there from 2018 till 2021, and it's been an interesting couple of years since I graduated. But I am here to tell you today about my thesis work that I did for my graduate degree, and I like to call this presentation West Virginia Legends and the Cultures They Haunt and Affect. As well as doing this, I'll be telling a couple of stories from my own life as well as my brother's life here, and he's here with us. Because, I mean, I'm billed as a storyteller, I gotta tell a story or two, you know. Anyways, I'm also an assistant archivist, helping with the West Virginia Regional History Center, which is a very interesting place if you're into Appalachian history and all. It's situated at West Virginia University in Morgantown. So with that, let's get started. I mean, what is a cryptid? We should probably clarify this since it's, the very first presentation of the day. It's an animal or a life form that hasn't really been yet confirmed by science, but they're claimed to have existed or exist still. So these creatures include Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, which are arguably some of the more popular cryptids out there. But my thesis focused on the Mothman, the Flatwoods Monster, and the Grafton Monster, which I like to call the West Virginia Big Three. And as you can see here, they all have their own unique appearances, which makes them really great icons for the state of West Virginia that really are proud of their folklore, their history, and the strange events that happen there, because I mean, not a lot else happens in West Virginia, so you might as well bank on the weird stuff that happens there. And Mothman comes from Point Pleasant in Mason County. Flatwoods Monster comes from Flatwoods in Braxton County, and the Grafton Monster comes from Taylor County, all in West Virginia. Mothman, there's at least 100 sightings between 1966 and 1967. It's a regional phenomena that was originally just around the Point Pleasant, Ohio, West Virginia area when it first started. But then it had a resurgence recently in the last 20 years, and now it's an international thing, really. It's kind of interesting seeing so many people around the world talking about this previously local legend in places like Russia or Japan or just really anywhere else besides West Virginia. It's known for its dark silhouette and massive wingspan and glowing red eyes. There were also reports that said it was a sandhill crane in several encounters. And as you can see by the look of the crane there, it has these bright red eyes right on its head there. And it's known for getting spooked real easily and having a really big wingspan. But Mothman was said to have been like 7 or 8 feet tall. What's a bird doing that's that tall in the middle of West Virginia? I mean, they also have said, oh, it was a sandhill crane that was blown off course. But at the same time, again, 8-foot tall bird. The last sighting of the Mothman was in December of 1967, a few days before the tragedy of the Silver Bridge disaster, in which 46 lives were taken just a few days before Christmas as the Silver Bridge that connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Gallipolis, Ohio, collapsed out of nowhere after being basically not well maintained for many years. And Mothman was seen a lot around the bridge in the days leading up to it. It said that the Mothman was an omen that predicted the fall of the bridge. Some people say, oh, the Mothman's who caused it, but if you say that to the locals in Point Pleasant, they'll get angry because it was human error that let the bridge fall. Mothman was just a warning. And then we move on to the Flatwoods Green Monster, or Braxy, as it's called locally in Braxton County. On September 12, 1952, a group of boys saw something fall out of the sky when they were playing in the playground of the elementary school at Flatwoods Elementary. And so they grabbed up a group of everyone, and one of their moms came up with them, and when they went up this nearby hill, they noticed a weird smell around them, and then they look and they hear a crack of a twig nearby, look nearby, and they see that 9-foot tall, spade-shaped head creature with its arms outstretched towards them. Of course, this scared them, completely senseless, and it made them fall down the hill trying to make sense of what was happening. And they were feeling, because of the smell and the shock, they were scared completely for days on end. And then the government even got involved after they went and reported this creature, and the infamous Project Blue Book that was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base came and investigated the whole occurrence that was happening. And one of the boys that saw the creature went with the mother that came with the group. The two of them went to CBS News in New York and presented that drawing on live TV in 1952, which I think was really cool that a local legend could be on national news like that in 1952 at the very beginning of television. But of course, there's no surviving reel of that, otherwise I'd have a copy of it. And this brings us to the Grafton Monster. It's a bit lesser known than the previous two because when you think of West Virginia, you think of the Flatwoods Monster or Mothman specifically. But Grafton Monster was seen on June 16th, 1964, when the late Robert Cockrell saw something weird on the side of the road as he was driving home late from work one night. He saw this weird thing that was like a big mass of walking flesh and seal fur that was just standing there, and of course he had to slow down and look at it, and it looked like that thing. A shambling 9-foot-tall horror. And then, of course, he immediately went to go write about it. His editor didn't believe him, but then eventually they ran a story, and then teenagers from all over the county went to go try and find this thing afterwards. Because that's what teenagers do when there's a monster nearby. They want to go beat it with a bat. And then it was also said that this thing was a polar bear that was escaped from the Pittsburgh Zoo. But the Pittsburgh Zoo is like an hour, 45 minutes away. Well, what would a polar bear be doing that far south, you know? But why are there so many monsters in West Virginia? I wanted to explore. I mean, a lot of West Virginia's immigrants were Scottish and Irish immigrants, and if you know anything about Scotland and Ireland, they're filled with rolling green hills and just beautiful scenery. And West Virginia kind of looks a lot like it. And of course, the Irish and the Scottish have a ton of stories of the fairies and mystical creatures that roam the hills that there were always all these warnings about. And I like to think that the stories of these immigrants turned from fairies and unicorns into aliens and Mothmen as time went on from the late 1800s to the mid-1900s when the Red Scare happened and paranoia was at an all-time high. So anything and everything that could be considered weird was fantasticalized and blown out of proportion. It can't be proven while some of these creatures were real. Something weird did happen that made people get into a tizzy because, of course, people are going to talk when there's a supposed sighting of a monster nearby. And since then, some communities have decided to cash in on these cultural icons and use them as a way to draw in people for tourism purposes. And that was the main focus of my thesis. Run through one slide. Why am I so interested in this? I've always been interested in monsters since I was a kid. Even my mom can tell you, even ever since we went to the library when I was little, I would always get stories and books about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and ever since then I've just been kind of fascinated with them, especially since I would also spend long summer days with my brother watching shows like Mystery Hunters, where we would watch documentaries on Mothman and whatnot for hours and hours. And since then, been kind of fascinated with it ever since. Not to mention, as bad as it was, Fallout 76 really pumped up the enthusiasm for cryptids since they have the inclusion of them in the game, which is a lot better than it was. So what was my process? I wanted to make my thesis about how these cryptids affected the cultural settings around them. I reached out to the mayors of these towns. I reached out to directors of tourism in Mason County and Braxton County. I even got contacts through the hotel I was staying at. With these leads, I set off to West Virginia on May 29, 2019, which is, my goodness, it's already been almost 4 years since then. And from May 29th to June 2nd, 2019, I did research in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And if you've ever been to Point Pleasant, there's like this main street that just, it's a pretty big main street. And I just kind of went to almost every business I could, trying to talk to people about their experiences with Mothman affecting their businesses and lives as West Virginians. This is where I stayed, the Lowe Hotel, which the Lowe Hotel is like the most central location in town where anybody that's from out of town kind of just comes to hang out, or even John Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecy, stayed there while he was researching the Mothman phenomenon. And if you go through Point Pleasant, there's so much folk art and cultural imagery relating to the Mothman. And as you can see, there's nothing more American than Mothman holding an American flag, right? This is painted on the back of an antique store in town. And you can see it when you're going up to the main street, actually. Not to mention you have the Ohio River there, showing their significance being a major stop along the Ohio River. And in that antique store, you can even see folk art for sale done by locals of the town, like, you know, magnets, candle holders, signs and stuff like that. It seemed like everyone there who could be a crafter was trying to cash in on their cultural icon, which was fascinating to me. Shirts, mugs, even, you know, painted stumps. And there was a little coffee store right next to the Mothman statue. They had a little notebook where people could draw in. People from all around the world would come here to this little local town to experience this tiny local legend and even do their own interpretations of the creature. And I thought it was very fascinating to see how something this small could attract people from, well, places like Australia, that, you know, they would come all the way to West Virginia of all places just to see where the Mothman was, you know? And in that same coffee shop, they had this little cutout of a Mothman with a little coffee cup, because why not? And in this same coffee shop, ooh, gosh darn, I keep going to in the same coffee shop, they have Mothman cookies. And Mothman droppings, which are just chocolate-covered espresso beans. And not only is there a ton of folk art, there's, you know, folk food that they do in the image of Mothman. Like the Mothman pizza from the Village Pizza Inn. Which, if you know the Village Pizza Inn, it's pretty important in the Mothman mythos because it was where Roger and Linda Scarberry came after their encounter with the Mothman while parking in the TNT area outside of town. They didn't know what to do, so they went to the Village Pizza Inn to try and figure out, oh, should we go talk to someone about this? And so since then, they try to get in on their little piece of Mothman history. And that Mothman pizza is actually really good, so. And even the Mason County seal has the Mothman statue on it. As you can see there. It has a laser pointer, look at that. And there's the Mothman statue itself, which without this, there would be no Mothman tourism, I would say. Because when people come by Point Pleasant, they want to go see the Mothman statue because it's easy enough to see in 5-10 minutes and then you can get back on the road to wherever you're going. It was built in 2003 and it was done by local sculptor Bob Roach after he was commissioned by city planner Charles Murphy. And he had no idea what Mothman was, despite living in the area for like 20 years. Which I thought was pretty interesting. Like, even some locals didn't really know what it was, but now every local knows. This is part of why people come to Point Pleasant. They even have a 24-hour webcam for it. And it's called the Moth Cam, as you can see. Sometimes you can see people leaving weird little offerings to the statue. Like recently there was people leaving bean cans around the Mothman statue. Which was interesting, but you know, people who like Mothman, they're always a little different, you know? And then there's that Mothman statue is right next to the Mothman Museum, which is also another hot spot for people coming through town. It was opened in 2005, but it moved to the current location in 2006, and it's owned by Jeff Walmsley, who's also a teacher in the area. And it was really just to showcase a few things that he had at first, some articles and doodads and things like that. But it turned into a full-fledged museum, and now he hosts a festival from it every year, which was absolutely huge this past year. Especially since, you know, COVID just ended, and wow, people wanted to come experience the Mothman again. Which brings us to the next portion of my research, Flatwoods, West Virginia, which was from June 2nd to June 5th, 2019. And as you go into the small village of Flatwoods, which is nearby Sutton, West Virginia, it's all smack dab in the middle of the state, they have this really neat sign that, you know, it's green, and it's about the green monster, and it's a very iconic sign. You can't really miss it. But I think it shows the pride that the small community of like 500 people has for this weird thing that happened. And they even have their own Flatwoods Monster Museum. Relatively new compared to the Mothman Museum, but it's getting bigger and bigger every single year. And everyone who's been, and a lot of artists who have been to it have left their own little mark on it. You have artists like Liz Pavlovic right there. And not to mention even Cryptid Crate has been there. And even they have a little film festival that's centered around the Flatwoods Monster every year. And as you can see, there's all sorts of Flatwoods memorabilia. And even former Governor Earl Ray Tomblin dedicated September 12th to be Flatwoods Monster Day, just to show how proud the state is of their weird little legend. And that's proudly hanging up right in the museum. Some more neat doodads. You have stuff from Japan, as you can see up there. And these are really neat cutouts and costumes that were done. And like this one was done for a school play in the area. They did an entire play based around the Flatwoods Monster, and it's on YouTube, and it's actually pretty good. Because when they bring that out, it's actually pretty creepy. And that's a child's costume, which I think it's a little spooky, but hey, so is the Flatwoods Monster. And that's also sitting in the front window. It's amazing to see the different interpretations people have and translate it into their art to show their love for this wonderfully weird thing. And there's a small little restaurant nearby, like right next to the hill where the monster was supposedly seen back in 1952. And it's appropriately named The Spot. And there's even these neat little cutout in front that people come while going through town to get their picture taken with. All having saucer sandwiches. And you always gotta get the neat souvenir cup to show that you've been where the Flatwoods Monster was, you know? And they have a collection of really big lawn chairs all done up to look like the Flatwoods Monster, scattered all across the county as a way to get people to experience the otherwise really rural area. As you can see, they're all situated in really pretty places too. Even the local elementary school had like a student quilt that they did. And as you can see, even the kids are proud of their weird monsters. As you can see, the Flatwoods Monster in multiple places. There's also Mothman down there. And also the Flatwoods Fire Department, volunteer fire department, has the monster as the mascot of their company. And everyone in the community is quite proud of it, as you can tell. And not to mention, they have the famous Flatwoods Monster Lantern, which you can only really get from Flatwoods. And it was done in the early 60s as a project for some young entrepreneurs in the area, and it just kind of turned from a neat little roadside trinket thing into, man, a lot of people want this thing, and it's evident of our area. People will come specifically to our area to get this thing. And from what I can tell, it's one of the earliest pieces of cryptid merchandise that's out there. And they even had, they even had a Flatwoods Monster Festival in conjunction with something called CharCon back in 2019. And it was the first time in 10 years that they had a Flatwoods Monster Festival. They had speakers come out, they had vendors that were coming out and talking about, and so they were talking about the monsters, selling merchandise related to the monster and, you know, West Virginian cryptids and things like that. And they even had a little parade with the monster itself leading the parade. And, you know, there's a little girl who was wearing that weird costume that we saw earlier. But also, the Flatwoods Monster didn't just affect West Virginia, it also affected other cultures around the world, specifically Japan. I worked with a wonderful woman from San Diego who grew up in Japan in the 1960s and 70s and was obsessed with UFOlogy and specifically the Flatwoods Monster when she was younger. And she helped me learn more about the Flatwoods Monster in Japan, accessing languages that I really couldn't at the time. And in Japan, it's known as the 3-meter-tall alien, which is interesting because, I mean, yeah, it's 3 meters tall, and it's interesting to see the Japanese interpretation of it being so very different from the American interpretation. It was part of the UFO boom in Japan that took place in the 60s and the 70s, and the Flatwoods Monster was kind of at the forefront of UFOs and aliens being popular over there. It's quite interesting. As you can see here, it's been featured in multiple video games, and not to mention all sorts of cute little merchandise. As well as Space Harrier 2, if any of you have ever played that from back in the day. It's really neat to see how it's been used so much there. But why is it so prevalent in Japan? I mean, people who grew up seeing the monster in their UFO books went on to make anime and video games and included it as a villain because it's a unique design. And in Japan specifically, it can be seen as like the mascot of UFOlogy. And then the final part of my thesis research took place in Grafton, which, if you didn't know, that's the birthplace of Mother's Day. But I focused more on, the Grafton monster. And as you can see, they're just starting up, trying to get their own name on the map as being famous for their own monster and all that. And you even have this little coffee shop which has that lovely little sign displaying this horrid creature. And it was taken from this place, or it was originally stolen from the side of the road, but then it was returned. But that's apparently where the monster was seen back in 1964. I was talking with a gentleman who was trying so hard to get a statue made to be put there, and I hope it's still in the works. As you can see, there's so much merchandise made of cryptids. I mean, as you can see by also all the vendors that are here. And also there's Fallout 76, which is a game made by Bethesda Softworks that came out in 2018, which takes place in a post-apocalyptic West Virginia. And one of the main villains that you see throughout the games is cryptids, like Mothman, and Flatwoods Monster, which even includes a scanned version of the sign from real life. And also the Grafton Monster. But to kind of conclude with the thesis research in general, I wanted to really explore how legends like these could affect the cultures and towns around them, how it makes people think, how it changes what gets people to come to smaller areas like these. Like I said, when you don't really have much else, you kind of want to bank on whatever works, In West Virginia, I mean, it's been losing coal jobs in the last while. And so they've been banking a lot on tourism, and cryptids have been big bucks for them. And I wanted to explore just how people use their cultural images to make their lives better, and how they wanted to get their own names out there. Otherwise, a lot of people might not even know about towns like Point Pleasant and Flatwoods and Grafton if it weren't for these internationally known creatures like the Grafton Monster through games like Fallout 76. And it's kind of an offshoot, if you've ever heard of dark tourism before, where people go to see where tragedy happened and weird things happened, and where people died, but I made mine more about what I call monster tourism, which focuses more on people going to where weird things have been seen, like the Grafton Monster and the Loveland Frogman. I mean, we're all participating in monster tourism right here, since Loveland's right up the road. We're all celebrating one big legend. And celebrating otherwise might just be a coffee shop tale, as I like to call it. Like, oh, did you hear that Jim saw a big frogman? Oh, wow, cool. But now everyone here knows what the frogman is. And sometimes it just takes a town really trying their best to get their names out there, and even internationally known video games like this, to do that sort of thing. And how are we doing on time, by the way?
You got 25 minutes, yeah.
25 minutes? Okay. But yeah, for the thesis part, that's what I wanted to finish up with right there. In the wild and wonderful state of West Virginia. And that was the first part of my presentation. As a storyteller, I wanted to tell you a couple stories from my life and my family's life growing up. I wouldn't be billed as a storyteller if I didn't tell stories, I love collecting stories. I mean, that's why I did a whole thesis based on stories. And so through my life, I've always been interested in hearing what weird occurrences people have had growing up. And, I kind of remember them like they're burned into the back of my brain. Like, for example, when I was growing up, my brother would always, we grew up in an old house that was built in like the 1920s or something like that, and every night he would leave his door open and beg our mother to shut it. And then every night he said he would see a weird man walk by in a suit by his door, put up a finger to his mouth and shush him before going down the stairs nearby. Every single night. And then he would wake up crying for help because of it. He called him the Ray Man. We don't know why. But I was obsessed with learning more about this ghost because I was, that weird kid who always wanted to know more about ghosts growing up. And it was so cool to be growing up thinking, oh wow, is it just cool imaginary friend? No, it was a ghost. It was a ghost that was weird and creepy, and we didn't believe him. Until, later on, he remembered talking about it. Because, kids will sometimes make imaginary friends that they don't remember having. But then stuff like this gets burned to the back of your brain. And, heck, it even scares me talking about it today. Another nice story that I like telling people about is a night where, this is also another one of my brother's stories, because apparently, despite me trying to be a studious person dealing with cryptozoology and the paranormal, my brother is the one who experiences all the weird stuff in my family. He was walking home from powerlifting practice one night, and it was snowing, and we lived right across the street from our high school, and there was a nice big patch of woods across the street there. He was walking by this patch of woods, and he turns and sees what looks like a big, white, hairy Sasquatch-type creature stomping in the woods next to him. He kind of stares at this thing for a while, wondering, what the heck is that? And then all of a sudden it takes off running, and my brother has no idea what to do, so he just books it back to home. And he doesn't tell us about it. He tells us about it like 3-4 years later, going, oh yeah, I saw this thing in the woods one day after powerlifting practice. And we're like, why didn't you tell us about this the day it happened? But ever since then, he didn't like going in the woods after that, despite always going in there with his friends when he was younger. It always felt like something was staring at us from the woods at night when putting out the trash. And not to mention the time where he was out with friends in a field somewhere, and he saw what looked like a deer staring at him from the tree line. But then he saw the deer stand up on 2 legs. And then when he saw this deer, he saw it bolt back across the tree line, and then he couldn't see it for a while, and then him and his friends all started running for the car. He's a big guy, and he kept up with a Marine at the time, all booking it towards the car. When they looked back in the mirror, they saw this weird thing, this weird deer standing up on 2 legs, running after the car, because that's normal. Yeah, those are just a few of the stories I have in my repertoire. I also wanted to do a little quiz for people here, and I also have a few prizes. It's kind of the test your memory sort of thing. I have here 3 special MetaZoo card packs, Halloween themed packs that I had extras of. But I wanted to ask, for the first question, what were the 3 towns I went to for my thesis work? You in the frog hat. Yes, that's it. these are neat little cards. They're supposed to be trick or treat little things, but they're nice to give out for this sort of stuff. Another question is, what was the name of the ghost that my brother saw in the story I told? The Rayman, yes. No problem. Okay, here's one that was pretty specific. What year was the Mothman statue commissioned? Yes. But yeah, I also wanted to open up the floor to possibly any stories anybody would like to tell me, or any questions that people have about my research or any of my experiences.
It's about I can't talk. The green monster. There's a sighting relatively soon after that, like the next town over.
The Frametown incident, yeah.
Did you have any more information on that? Because I found like one article about it, and it didn't really go into a lot.
See, that was interesting because only a few people saw that, and it was like a husband and his wife at the time, and they saw what appeared to be like a big stick figure that like resembled the Flatwoods Monster kinda,
Yeah.
but it was like outside of the weird spade suit it had.
The thing I saw, it looked like it had like a skirt, but it looked like a reptile on top.
Yeah, because apparently there's theories saying like the top half of the Flatwoods Monster is just a mechanical suit, and what they saw at the Frametown incident was the monster without the suit. It's an interesting thing that not a lot of people know about.
Yeah, I can't find any other information on that.
There are a few good books about it. I know it just takes quite a bit of looking for that sort of stuff, especially when so few people saw it and it's not really reported on as much as the main incident. But look up the Frametown incident and you'll be able to see quite a few more facts about it.
They had like the news article at the museum.
Oh, cool.
Right. So I've heard.
Yeah. I know there's a couple of neat History Channel things about it too, so.
Yeah.
You would have a question?
No, I just had a comment that when people go to Point Pleasant to see that statue, that sign is the one the biggest.
Yeah, people don't go to the Point Pleasant Mothman statue specifically to see the front, they go to see the butt. The shiny hiney, as it's called.
I went down to Point Pleasant and I talked to this guy who supposedly took a picture of the TNT tunnel. And nothing showed up, but then some very big divine thing showed up in the film. And have you heard when you were down there, did people think it was like an evil presence or?
Like Mothman in general, or?
Yeah, in general.
It really depends on the person. Depending on the people I went to, either they hated it or they loved it. Some people saw it as like a weird demon. Some people compared it to the golden calf in the center of town from the Bible. And some people saw it as a sort of dark angel that brought their town up from nothing after it was nearly dead in the early 2000s. It really just depends on who is looking at it, you know? Yeah.
To go back into a bit more of an academic aspect, do you think that with these three monsters and that general area of West Virginia, do you think because of how corporatized and homogenized American culture and pop culture can be, do you feel like that has any sort of impact when, like, oh, here's this unique local thing? Do you feel like that helps catalyze it because it's separate and like more of a genuine cultural product than something from Hollywood or something?
I would say so, because there are several reports of Mothman around the world, like Chicago has been having a lot of Mothman sightings, but when people think of Mothman, they think of West Virginia. And it's they cash in on this fact pretty hard, and I think they try their best to make it as unique as possible compared to other things like the hundreds of Bigfoot sightings we see across the United States, or the hundreds of Loch Ness Monster sightings we see every year, or hear about, rather. And I think what really catalyzes them is their unique their unique appearances, and their scary as heck stories behind them. Compared to, oh, I saw a big hairy man in the woods. Everyone has a cousin who says that, so. I think that's what really sets them apart, and really what gives West Virginia's folklore and folk life in general a unique edge over other sorts of folk monsters. I mean, heck, Loveland Frogman's pretty unique. And that's why we're doing a whole festival about it now, because compared to other monsters, where are you going to find a frogman besides near the Little Miami River?
Only in Ohio.
Only in Ohio.
So when people think about Mothman, they also think about the Men in Black.
Oh yeah, the Men in Black are closely connected to the Mothman, I would say, considering as all these events were happening from 1966 to 1967, people were being harassed by the so-called Men in Black in Point Pleasant. Newspaper writers were being told to keep quiet. People who saw aliens were told to keep quiet. And if you talk to people in town, they'll say, oh yeah, we saw some weird dudes in black suits going up and down the main street, acting weird, trying to tell people to shush. And they're not just, a comic book or a movie thing. I think because of all the appearances of them and how, well reported they are in Point Pleasant's history, it's kind of terrifying to think about that they're out there.
This is an end.
What was that? That's a good question.
What was the question?
Gosh, it really just depends on the person. Some people say, oh, it's just a bird, it flew away eventually, or it never existed at all, or, oh, it was a figment of people's imaginations. But eventually, the Mothman, especially with how it just disappeared after the fall of the Silver Bridge, it's interesting to think about where it went, but maybe it just flew off to a different area. Maybe that explains why places like Chicago have sightings now, because these weird creatures go into different places. The Flatwoods Monster is also thought to be an alien, so maybe it went back home.
I have a question. I have been reading on the news that they say that Mothman was sighted at 9/11.
It was also cited at Chernobyl as well, and the Fukushima incident in Japan. It's like I said, it's thought to be an omen for disasters, and considering how many different occurrences where tragedies happen and it's been seen at the same time, I like to think that there's some sort of weird force out there, or at least it senses something and it goes towards where tragedy's about to happen. It's pretty cool. It's not that in the Fukushima incident especially, it's not that the sighting there was also a Tengu of Japanese folklore, and if you know anything about Tengu, they're shown as big black birdmen, and Mothman is also considered a big black birdman in some cases, so. Any other questions?
Are you going to collaborate with your brother to write a book?
I thought about it, to be honest. I think we got time for one more. Oh.
Have you studied other cryptids that might be, are other cryptids thought to be a portent of bad things to come, or just Mothman and the bridge? Or, excuse me, in West Virginia.
I would say Mothman is the biggest omen type of creature, but Gosh, there have not been too many that I've seen that have been omen types.
I would just like to comment that I do think it's interesting that all of these omens are from man-made.
Yeah, it's all man-made stuff.
Man-made disasters.
Man-made negligence, and in fact, the Silver Bridge is the reason why the Bridge Act that was signed into effect by Lyndon B. Johnson.
Sir, I missed the initial part. What university did you do your thesis for, and for what degree was it?
Bowling Green State University, and for a popular culture degree in folklore.
A master's or PhD?
Master's.
Okay. And then a second question. During your research on this, did you look at the works of Trey Barker?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Did you go to the Clarksburg Library and review his papers?
I was not able to, but I was able to get my hands on several of his books at least. He's interesting in West Virginia history considering he just had so much to do with all these weird events that were happening. And then he was eventually told to stop, apparently, because he was getting too far into it.
He was the ultimate joker. Everything the guy did was a joke.
I've heard that too. But I think we're out of time, so thank you all for coming to my presentation.
Dee Elliott, great job. Wow. Find Dee out in the hallway and talk to them some more. I'm sure they're willing to give you more details. And I want to thank Strange Road for a great job on this PA and AV. Thanks, Strange Road. Make sure you follow them on their podcasts, on their YouTubes, on their social medias, The Strange Road. Some great content on there. We're going to take a break, and at 11 o'clock we'll have Ashley Hilt talk about her experiences in the Fortean realm. So stay tuned. We'll take a break. We've got face painters. I haven't been to the face painter yet, but I heard she's really good. So go check her out. You need to buy the tickets at the merch booth for the different levels that you want. $5 for a glitter tattoo, $10 for a half a face, $15 for a full face. So support her. She's got great frog material.